What if a Chinese worker earning around $1,000 a month enjoys a comparable, and in some categories better, standard of daily living than an American worker earning $4,000? It sounds counterintuitive. But when you lay the numbers out side by side, a striking pattern emerges, one that exchange rate comparisons systematically obscure. Two economies, two completely different price structures, two fundamentally different ways of organizing consumer life. Over the next several minutes, the goal is to walk through the actual cost of everyday existence in both countries using concrete figures. And the most surprising finding may not be the income gap itself, but the hidden cost structures sitting behind those incomes. Start with the most cited comparison. Wages. The average monthly salary in China is approximately $1,007. The average monthly salary in the United States is approximately $4,276. By a straight currency conversion, American wages run roughly 4.2 times higher than Chinese wages. That single figure has been quoted endlessly as proof of the wealth gap between the two economies. But quoting wages without quoting prices tells only half the story. What can each of those salaries actually buy? A meal at an inexpensive restaurant costs around $2.84 in China versus $20 in the United States, roughly 7 times more. A dozen eggs runs $1.57 in China and $4.41 in America. A cappuccino costs $2.95 versus $5.32. A pound of white rice goes for 43 cents in China and just over $2 in the US. The first key insight: while American wages are about 4 times higher, prices for everyday food items often run 5, 7, or even more times higher. The cost of living gap in many categories is widening faster than the wage gap. This is precisely why economists rarely rely on raw exchange rates to compare living standards across borders. Instead, they use a concept called purchasing power parity, or PPP, a measure of what a currency can actually buy within its own economy, rather than what it is worth on a foreign exchange screen. The picture becomes even more striking when the focus shifts to infrastructure and basic services, an area that quietly drains the wallets of middle-class households worldwide. Monthly broadband internet runs around $11 in China versus more than $72 in the United States. A mobile phone plan costs roughly $9 per month in China and over $60 in America. Basic utilities, electricity, water, gas, garbage collection average about $52 per month for a Chinese household, compared to over $210 for an American household. This is where the squeeze on the American middle class becomes visible. These are not discretionary expenses. A household can choose not to dine out or skip the morning coffee, but in a modern economy, it cannot really opt out of internet, phone service, or basic utilities. These are structural costs of contemporary life. The implication is significant. Even with wages 4 times higher, a substantial portion of that American premium is quietly absorbed by recurring infrastructure costs that most consumers barely notice on a monthly basis. Why is China able to keep these costs so low? The answer combines scale economies, massive infrastructure investment, and a sector structure in telecom and utilities that prioritizes coverage and affordability over private sector profit margins. The trade-off is lower industry profitability, but a much lower threshold for participating in modern digital life. The American system runs in the opposite direction. Market-based pricing, private operation, oligopolistic competition. Prices reflect not only costs, but also market structure. The result is high headline wages alongside relentless basic service expenses that compound silently. There is, however, one notable counter-example: automobiles. A new compact car costs approximately $18,500 in China and around $35,700 in the United States. Absolute prices favor China, but the more meaningful comparison is how many months of average wages each price represents. In China, that car equals roughly 18 months of average income. In America, it works out to about 8. By the more relevant measure of purchasing power, American consumers actually have an easier time affording a new vehicle than their Chinese counterparts. This reflects a mature American auto industry, a vast domestic market, intense brand competition, and a well-developed consumer credit ecosystem. The counterexample matters because it complicates any simple narrative that everything is cheaper in China. The Chinese low-cost advantage is concentrated in labor-intensive services, locally sourced food, and network effect infrastructure. In capital-intensive durable goods, the American economy often retains the upper hand. Now the comparison enters its most consequential terrain, housing. This is the single largest exception to the Chinese low-cost narrative and the area where ordinary Chinese families face their most painful financial reality. Estimates place Beijing's price-to-income ratio at around 37 times annual household income. Shanghai sits at around 38 times. In other words, an average household would need 30 to 40 years of total gross income, not savings, but every dollar earned, to purchase a single home outright. To put this in perspective, the national average price-to-income ratio in the United States sits between 4 and 6 times. Even the most expensive American metros, such as San Francisco and New York, rarely cross 10. Beijing and Shanghai operate at multiples that are extreme even by global megacity standards. This single data point explains a great deal about Chinese household behavior. It clarifies why families routinely pool savings across 2 or 3 generations, why parents shoulder the bulk of down payments for their children, why home ownership functions almost as a precondition for marriage in many regions. Under this price structure, buying a home is not an individual decision, but a multi-generational financial undertaking. An important shift is underway, however. Over recent years, the Chinese property market has gone through a major adjustment. Mortgage rates have fallen sharply in many cities. Home prices have declined from earlier peaks. Affordability, on paper, has improved compared to the peak levels of a few years ago, but the price adjustment has not translated into renewed enthusiasm. Instead, a generational psychological shift is taking hold. Younger Chinese are increasingly delaying marriage, postponing home purchases, preferring to rent, and resisting the prospect of 30-year mortgages. The reasoning is straightforward. They have watched the previous generation become heavily leveraged in a declining property market, and they are not eager to repeat that experience. This behavioral change is itself a significant macroeconomic signal. It suggests that the old logic of property-driven consumption is loosening and that the broader economy is undergoing a structural reset of expectations. Pulling all of this together yields a deeper conclusion than any simple ranking of which country is better to live in. China has engineered a low-cost, high-efficiency consumer economy. Prices of food, telecommunications, utilities, and urban infrastructure are pushed to extraordinarily low levels, allowing ordinary people to access modern living standards at modest expense. The price of this model is housing, an asset class inflated to levels rarely seen elsewhere in the world. Locking household wealth into real estate, the United States has engineered a high-wage, high-cost, high-service margin economy. Salaries are substantial, but the cost of nearly every recurring service component is significant, steadily eroding the disposable income of middle-class households. The compensating advantage is comparatively manageable housing affordability and stronger relative purchasing power for major durable goods. Neither model is unambiguously superior. They reflect 2 different development philosophies and 2 different implicit social contracts between citizens, markets, and the state. For anyone tracking global living costs, cross-border employment, asset allocation, or simply trying to understand the structure of the world economy more clearly, purchasing power parity lens is worth taking seriously for the long run. If this analysis was useful, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with anyone interested in macroeconomics. Future episodes will continue unpacking the global economic realities that headline currency conversions tend to hide.